Thanks, Adira. As Adira said, I'm Blaine Hoopert. I'm the Sponsor and Partnership Associate at WiSys, and I'd like to welcome you to the state finals for one of the great competitions that WiSys has, our Quick Pitch competition, which we're, of course, proud to be partnering with UW Superior to have here as a part of the Spark Symposium. Many WiSys programs celebrate student research and innovation. Quick Pitch is one such event, created by WiSys and piloted at UW-Eau Claire in 2015. The goal of Quick Pitch is to encourage innovative thinking by inspiring students to considering the impact of their research on society and by teaching them how to communicate and share the why behind what they are doing with people who they interact with every day. Now that might be your banker or maybe your grandmother or someone you might just meet at a party, but being able to share with them the research that you do. The WiSys Quick Pitch competition is open to both undergraduate and graduate researchers in any major. If a student is doing research in an area that they are passionate about, WiSys wants to help them share their story and consider the impact of their research findings and what those research findings could have on their community. Throughout the campus, quick pitch competitions at the 11 regional universities of Wisconsin, we had competitors from the sciences, from humanities, from education, from business, and yes, even from music. With the Olympics starting today, it's kind of fitting to think of this as a competition as if all the swimmers, the skiers, the gymnasts, and the weightlifters were all competing on the same level playing field. 70 students from all 11 regional campuses worked with their research advisors and community mentors to perfect their pitches and compete with other students from their campus in the spring. Today, we will hear from the students that qualified to move on to the state final at their campus competitions. They will be competing today for 4 prizes totaling $1,600, which includes a $100 People's Choice Award that everyone in the room here will have the opportunity to vote on. Our participants today will have 3 minutes to impress our panel of judges with their ability to explain the value and impact of their research, after which the judges will have a couple of minutes to ask questions. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our judges, who again were a part of our previous panel, Dr. Brad Bowling, who is an associate professor of food science at UW-Madison, Mary Blanchard, associate director of the Wisconsin Energy Institute, and Doris Mold, who's president of Sunrise Agriculture Association. Thank you all for volunteering your time out of your busy schedules to take part in this event. My colleague Sadie Euling and I will keep everyone on track by keeping time and introducing the competitors and the topics for their research. And with that, I think we can get started. First up, from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, with the topic, New Directions in Tumor Ablation with Biocompatible Foam. Here is Addie Farber and Emma Jeiter.
Hi, my name is Emma.
And I'm Addie, and we are both biomedical engineering students at UW-Eau Claire. Our research focuses on the development of a therapeutic injectable foam mentored by Dr. Elizabeth Gagowski of the Materials Science Department and Dr. Jeremy McBride of Mayo Clinic in Eau Claire.
According to a 2019 report from the Wisconsin Cancer Collaborative, there are around 32,000 cancer diagnoses each year in Wisconsin alone. A common way to treat certain cancer diagnoses is with an ablation procedure, which is a minimally invasive technique that uses either extreme cold or extreme heat to remove cancerous tissue in a tumor. Ablation is a viable option for those where a more invasive surgery can't be performed, or the patient has failed their radiotherapy or chemotherapy treatments. The global tumor ablation market was estimated at $1.67 billion in 2023, and with the rising prevalence of cancer and the need for safer treatment options like ablation, it is expected to grow 13.5% between 2024 and 2030.
During an ablation procedure, the healthy tissue can be damaged by these extreme temperatures if it's not separated properly. Injecting carbon dioxide or saline at the site of the ablation are the current techniques of doing this. Due to gravity, however, carbon dioxide and saline can move around inside the body, which can expose the healthy tissue to these harmful temperatures.
Our solution to this issue is the development of a biocompatible foam that will remain in contact with healthy tissue for the duration of a typical 60-minute ablation procedure. Our intention with the foam is that it will provide patients with faster, less painful recoveries. I think everyone can agree that cancer is a prominent issue in our society, and we are working little by little to try and improve its outcomes.
Over at Mayo Clinic in Eau Claire, Dr. McBride has previously conducted studies on pigs and is now working towards clinical trials. In the lab, we are focusing on how to commercialize our foam. So one thing we are exploring is how to store the foam so that it can be used at a later time by a physician in a clinical setting. If you've ever eaten Dippin' Dots or freeze-dried candy, you might be familiar with the process of freeze drying. We are currently experimenting with freeze drying our foam so that we can create a shelf-stable product that can be easily utilized during these tumor ablation procedures.
Since the ablation market is rising, there is a higher demand for innovation in tumor ablation procedures to make them safer and more effective. We have hopes that our foams will provide patients with faster, less painful recoveries, and we aim to expand access to and to commercialize the foams for real-life application. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. What type of cancers would this be targeted toward?
Yeah, so it's mostly, or it is solidified tumor cancer. So it can target like lung cancer, liver, kidney, bone cancer as well.
So I'm curious, would this ever be a first choice option for treatment? Because you said that comes after maybe radiation or other types of, if they're not eligible for more invasive surgery, would you want this to be a preferred way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the physician determines is the best option for the patient because every patient is different. But if they determine that ablation should be the path taken, then yes, and the foam would just aid in that procedure as well.
Our hopes is that the foam would replace the carbon dioxide or saline for better outcomes.
And just out of curiosity, if the tissue is injured in the way that it can be with saline or CO2, can it heal? Does it take, or is that, or
I
do you
think
know?
Over time,
Yeah.
it just would prolong the recovery
Mhm.
process.
And it'll provide more pain for the patient.
And now from UW Superior with the topic External Debt and Economic Growth, a cross-country analysis on South Asia. Osman Ahmed.
You actually pronounced my name outside way better than you did here. But thank you for trying. I was waiting for it. I was like, he's gonna like kill it, but it's okay. All good to go. Let me take out my fake glasses. How many of you have ever been in debt? Perfect. And would you say that that debt affected the way that you spend your money? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that individual concept that you just thought of and project it onto a bigger stage. Countries. Countries just like us have income, their economic growth, and debt, money that they owe to external lenders and internal lenders. Economic theory states that as external debt rises, economic growth is negatively affected. That's because some, if not most, of that income is used to pay off the debt that the country has accumulated over time. This is in the form of interest payments, principal loan payments. And what this essentially does is it takes away funding from productive resources within the economy, such as education and infrastructure, and shovels it away towards paying off your debt. So that potential economic growth and income is now lost. So my research aims to study this unique relationship that exists between external debt and economic growth in South Asia. You might wonder, why South Asia? Well, if my beautiful brown skin is any indication, I belong to that region. But other than my own vanity, South Asia currently has a 86% debt to GDP ratio, meaning that 86% of its income is paid off into its debt. This is a detrimental figure that puts the entire region at risk, which we recently saw in Sri Lanka when it defaulted on its debt and severed one of the most severe economic crises in recent times. So my research aims to study the 8 countries that comprise of this region in a post-COVID world, where we saw economies slowing down, but external debt was rising as countries were struggling to keep their economies afloat. As an economist, one of the biggest achievements for us is to use our knowledge and study of economics to research real-world issues and find solutions for them. So this research was a great way to shed light on an issue that is prevalent in South Asia and across the globe, but also to understand the causality of it. What is causing this negative relationship to exist, but more importantly, to persist? Because only if we understand the why can we get to the solution. And obviously, I have a personal connection to this research, and this is a topic that affects my own home, Pakistan. So the goal with this research is hopefully to use the privilege of knowledge that I have amassed to make future economic policy, to help tackle this issue, to make economies prosper for their people. Thank you. Question time.
So you have talked about making these, if you made policy changes to impact this, how long would you need to turn things around? In the case of, you said 86% of
Yes, ma'am.
GDP. Have you looked into kind of what length of time we're looking at? Generations?
Yes, ma'am. So I'll start off by saying that I don't know about my fellow participants, but my research is ongoing. So by the time WiSys came to our campus, I was actually applying for funding for my research. So it's ongoing. I actually completed my initial literature review this Monday, and I will start writing and collecting data. So in economics, there's a time lag effect. Whenever we do regression, there's always a time lag. I can enact a policy today, but it will take time for it to be enacted. The governor spoke about investing money, 15 million into the agricultural project. It's going to take time for that money to actually have an impact in the future. So do I have an answer for that right now? No, because the regression has not been done. But the 86% number that I said is for the 8 countries that comprise of that region. What I'm doing with my research is I'm individually analyzing them. You take the United States and you take Pakistan. You can't put them in the same basket because in this research, I found out that there's 3 relationships that can exist between debt and economic growth. Either it's positive, which is in the short run. You get loan, you spend that on infrastructure, you spend that on education, you spend it on the economy, you're going to experience economic growth. But most research says that there's a threshold. So there's a point when it reaches the top that has been from 75% to 90%. So that time, it really depends on what country you're analyzing. Pakistan can be different, Nepal can be different, Afghanistan can be different, India can be different. So that time will depend on after I do the regression, but I will let you know that once I have the answer to that, when the research is done.
Economist, actually,
Nice.
So, thank you.
I mean, such a broad region. What is going to be your focus as you conduct the literature review? Are you going to go country by country, or what is going to be your
So if
approach there?
if you go into this realm of external debt and economic growth, most you'll find is sub-Saharan Africa, Pacific Island countries, or they'll take an even bigger subset and be LICs, lower income countries or lower developing countries. They always focus on big panels. So a paper that I read, which please don't ask me, I can't quote you exactly, I can't reference it right now, but it said that, which I mentioned prior, every country has a separate relationship with economic debt and external debt because the thresholds are different. So that's why I have this 8-country region, analyze them differently, do their regression, and find out what relationship that they might have. Does that answer that question? Close enough? Thank you. Perfect.
From UW La Crosse with the topic, efficacy of Genepin for treatment of chemotherapy-resistant glioblastoma. Anna Horn.
Okay, I'd like to begin today by discussing breast cancer, prostate cancer, and skin cancer. Now, what do all three of these cancers have in common? It's that when diagnosed in the first stage, there is a greater than 95% survival rate 5 years past their diagnosis. Unfortunately, for cancers such as glioblastoma, this is not the case. 5 years after diagnosis, 7.4% of patients will survive. And why is that? It's because not only glioblastoma is a rare form of brain and spinal cord cancer, and it has few treatment options, and there's an issue of chemotherapy resistant cells after receiving treatment. Now, what if I told you that there is a drug used in traditional Chinese medicine today that's anti-inflammatory, anti-jaundice, great benefit to healthy cells, but can kill cancer cells? I'll pause. Hi, my name is Anna Horn. I attend UW La Crosse, and under the supervision of Dr. Mary Zimmerman, our team is studying the efficacy of Genopin as a treatment for chemotherapy-resistant glioblastoma. So our first steps is, does this really work? So we have 2 human glioblastoma lines, one that is chemotherapy resistant and one that is not. So what we have been doing is doing 4 and 24-hour drug treatments. And what we see is that typical brain cells and nervous system cells have long axons and dendrites. But when we treat it with this drug, we see it change. It shrivels up. They detach from the plate. And these are things that normally when we see in culture, it means that the cells are dead. So from there, we have been doing different tests. So one is an MTT drug assay. So as we increase the concentration of the drug, we see the proliferation levels decrease. Further indication that something is happening to our cells when we add this drug. So our next steps are to determine the underlying molecular, what is happening, what proteins are present when the cells take up this drug. Are they dying or are they in a lie in wait kind of state? So from there, we can see, okay, once we look at specific proteins, we can see that yes, this drug is killing these cells and could potentially be a treatment that moves into clinical trials and can have less detrimental effects than traditional chemotherapy has today. And so that one day, Genopin can maybe turn that 7.4% survival into 100% survival. Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what Genopin is? What is it derived from? What is it?
Yes, so Genopin is a drug derived from the fruit extract of the gardenia flower. So it's already used today in traditional Chinese medicine, and you see those healthy benefits, and that's why it's still used.
I'm just curious that in Chinese medicine, what do they use it to treat?
Yeah, so it's kind of generally that anti-inflammatory response, so swelling, pain. And then also it's used to treat jaundice. So jaundice is a condition that is yellowing of the skin, and it's often an indication of liver issues. So anti-jaundice helping prevent that.
I'm just curious, how many people are impacted by glioblastoma each year?
Yes, so glioblastoma, unfortunately, around 300,000 US citizens are diagnosed with glioblastoma each year. Thank you.
From UW Stout with the topic Fringe Media Consumption and Perceived Intelligence of the Opposite Gender. Are they related? Genevieve Shapleski.
In today's digital age, the news is anything but impartial. Instead of providing us with unbiased information about world happenings, sources are algorithmically showing people politically extreme ideas about such happenings. And this may seem harmless, but this is actually perpetuating harmful ways of thought that are eating away at the very foundation of our Wisconsin communities. Hi, my name is Genevieve Czapleski, and I'm an applied social science alum from the University of Wisconsin Stout. And my research focused on just that, how engaging with news sources on the extreme ends of the political spectrum, referred to by me as fringe sources, influences how Stout students think about one another, and more specifically, how they think about the intelligence of the opposite gender. With the rise of politically unfavorable content on unregulated platforms perpetuating harmful gender stereotypes, understanding how engaging with fringe sources influences thought is of utmost importance, especially in a world where we're becoming increasingly hostile to one another. Through my online surveys and in-person interviews with Stout students, I came across two startling findings. First, although engagement with these types of sources was low overall, it did play a role in influencing harmful beliefs. If you engaged with either left or right-leaning sources and identified as conservative, you were more likely to believe that intelligence is based solely in biology, meaning engagement with these sources on either side of the political spectrum seemed to perpetuate within conservatives the false idea that intelligence is linked to biology. Second, my findings completely contradicted past research. They completely inverted the phenomena that men tend to rate themselves as having higher intelligence than they actually do, and women the opposite. My findings found that men tended to rate themselves as having less intelligence than they actually do, and women the opposite, which potentially uncovers a desire by college-age men to avoid the negative social consequences of saying they are smarter than women, or by a confidence of women's intelligence in higher education. Through these findings, it is clear that engaging with these types of sources at all has a tangible influence on how Stout students are thinking about one another. This research must be done across a wider body of people in order to understand the full scope of the issue. And once we understand that, we can begin exploring solutions. Solutions that include informing policy in order to regulate what is considered news, so we can build toward a more peaceful and cooperative Wisconsin. In conclusion, what we consume on the internet can have a huge impact on how we act toward people in our communities. If we are to emerge from this era of near total social and political degradation, we have to understand how such a large part of our lives can be hurting us, and by extension, those around us. Thank you.
Thank you. In your research, you mentioned that you conducted surveys. How many students were involved in this type of research, and how did you reach out to get their types of responses?
Yes, so I did, like I said, an online survey, and I gained a random sample from Stout's research office, which ended up being 1,500 students. And I had about a 23.3% response rate. I was hypothesizing something around 20%. So it was very nice that I ended up getting about a 23% response rate. And like I said, that was a random sample. And so that was pulled from all sorts of demographics from the Stout student body.
I'm curious how you were able to judge that if a student rated themselves as being lower in intelligence than they actually were. How did you know what their actual intelligence is?
So that was actually an oversight that I realized like 2 days ago, was like, oh, what past research was saying was that men rated themselves, like I said, as having higher intelligence than they actually did. And what I started to realize was I didn't actually measure for their actual intelligence. But what I did find that still led me to believe that my research inverted past findings was that men were less confident in their own intelligence. And so they were more likely to say that they weren't as smart as women, and women were more likely to say that they were smarter than men. And so I did take that as them having much more confidence and then less confidence in their intelligence, as inverting their own, that ratio between their own intelligence. So admittedly, I didn't actually test for that, but I found the results to be applicable enough to act as a proxy, that confidence to act as a proxy. Thank you.
From UW Platteville with the topic Fabrication of Microscale Pyramidal Channels for 3D Printing Advanced Structures. Max Kana.
Hi, my name is Max Kana, and today I'll be talking about the microscopic strengthening of 3D printed products. Now, when you think of 3D printing, what do you think of? What industries do you think of? You're probably just thinking of some hobbyist in his garage printing out whatever he wants. That's me, I'm that hobbyist. You're probably not thinking about the construction of a skyscraper or the frame of a supercar. Why is that? As it stands now, 3D printing is in a really weird stage. It's so incredibly cost efficient and user friendly, but the finished goods that are produced simply don't meet the standard requirements for a lot of industries in terms of strength and durability. That lack of strength is the primary focus of my research. How can we strengthen these 3D printed products without compromising on the properties that make them such an appealing manufacturing option? Imagine 3D printing plastics to be so strong that you could print the frames out of cars and aircraft out of rolls of plastic far removed from aluminum and steel manufacturers. This research's solution to strengthening 3D printing plastics is to suspend microscopic fibers of advanced materials like carbon fiber and glass inside of traditional 3D printing plastics, and then using specialty technology to align those microscopic fibers in controlled direction, increasing strength in those controlled directions substantially. Now, why the big focus on alignment and controlled directions? Now, think of a long wooden dowel. It's super duper hard to pull apart or compress into a disc, but it's super easy to snap across your knee. We want to utilize that lengthwise strength of rods and fibers at the microscopic level to increase strength at the macroscopic level, along lines that we could control. Imagine placing rods of carbon fiber, one of the strongest man-made materials, parallel to forces being applied to make products harder to pull apart or compress, or placing them perpendicular to forces being applied to make them harder to shear or tear, all at a scale unseeable to the human eye, without compromising the look, feel, or size of 3D printed parts, and without altering the traditional 3D printing process, just by slightly modifying the filaments that we use and the way that those filaments are used. Now, as a mechanical engineer, my research is specifically focused on the how. How do we extrude these fibers and align the microscopic fibers inside of them? The process that our team devised is by using a fabricated silicon chip to act as a filter that automatically aligns the fibers inside of the filament the direction that we want them to go as the filament is passed through it, and then designing and building a housing around said chip to act as, or creating a very simple, easily attachable external part that can be bolted onto any traditional 3D printer, allowing us to start using that specialty filament, extruding the fibers inside of it, aligning them the direction that we want them to go, and creating stronger parts. Now, while this research can only tackle this topic at the consumer scale, it's pioneering the way that we idealize and conceptualize 3D printing at an industrial scale and really at any scale. It's a modest but consequential step in the strengthening of 3D printing plastics. Thank you all for listening. Do you have any questions?
You say right now you're kind of at consumer scale. How long, best estimate, do you think it could take to be industrialized? And what is the cost differential between current materials and what potentially this kind of plastic with printing? What's the difference in economics?
Timeline wise, it's really hard to say. This project is one of the first of its kind, and it's still in the very early stages of its research. So I don't think I could give you an accurate estimation on that. However, I can give you a pretty accurate estimation on the cost differential, and it's surprisingly low. When we're making these specialty filaments, when we're dispersing the fibers inside of them, we're working at such low concentration values that you really do not need a lot of the advanced materials. I think that our current trials are only running 5% carbon fiber by weight. And you can buy, I think that I don't know the exact size of the boxes that we use of carbon fiber, but one box of carbon fiber material can print out meters upon meters of the filament that we want to use. So the extra investment that you put into manufacturing these advanced filaments really makes its return in the amount that you can produce. Does that answer your question?
It does to a degree, but also how much does it extend the life? How much would extend the life versus, current? For instance, if you're making a plane and you're using metal versus, and then you go to the plastic. I'm kind of looking on return on investment. Will the plane last longer? And how much, is there an estimate as to how much more durable that those materials would be?
In terms of like lasting, resisting time and erosion, I don't know if we see an increase in that with respects to metal, but just sort of different properties. Metallic steels and stuff, they rust, they tarnish, they fray. Plastic does the same thing to a certain extent, but just under very, very different parameters. Thank you all. Oh,
I have one more question, sorry. What do you see as the very first potential target market? Like what product would you make first?
the target market is very much me, those people making whatever they want in their garages. Especially with the way that we've designed and devised this solution or this product. It is designed to be easily packaged, easily condensed into a product that you could just simply pick up, order, attach to any 3D printer that's on the market right now, and then start using. Thank you all.
From UW Stevens Point with the topic Sorcerer AI, Article Integrity Companion, Alex Susha.
Online misinformation can ruin your life. Last year, my older brother investigated a case study where a man was hospitalized after consuming a near fatal amount of bleach. Only it wasn't an accident. The man consumed it after reading an unverified website claiming that bleach cured COVID-19. What's worse, the man showed no signs of mental illness. He was just following dangerous misinformation. This shows the danger, the power of online inaccuracy, and it extends to so much more than just medical misinformation. Online misinformation on news, politics, education, and day-to-day life choices are destroying our society. On top of that, AI, the proliferation of AI, is leading to a new era of misinformation. AI deepfakes and AI-generated articles are making it almost impossible to trust what we read. This is especially dangerous during an election year. And that makes sense, as the Pew Research Center found that online misinformation is a top 5 issue in the United States today. How are we supposed to make smart decisions about our elections if we can't trust anything we read? Conventional fact checking can no longer keep up. We need to innovate. That's why I say it's time we find truth through innovation. Enter Sorcerer AI. For the past 9 months of my first year of college, I've been researching the possibilities of an AI-powered fact checker. Starting out, our goal was to make Sorcerer AI the fastest and easiest way to determine if a website was biased or credible. Through natural language processing, which enables AI to understand human language, it can analyze the word choice of any article to find its reputability rating and political bias. Through this method, we were able to finish a prototype in April, and we actually released our alpha version of our product on the Chrome Web Store on July 15th. However, in the process of trying to make the best fact checker, we realized that we needed to do more to increase its accuracy. We're currently working on a new model that works with ChatGPT's most advanced research system that uses 5 different factors to determine reputability as opposed to just one. These factors are the currency of the article, the citations used in the article, the credibility of the author itself, the purpose or point of view of the article, and the overall quality of the news source itself. Based on our database of over 30,000 articles, which is what we're training this model on, we've determined that the accuracy is comparable to human fact checkers at over 95%. However, it is far, far faster. Together, let's end this era of misinformation and find truth through innovation with Sorcerer AI by stopping misinformation and preventing dangerous acts because of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, there's so many potential applications and
Absolutely.
scenarios that you could come up with there. Just kind of going back to the medical analogy,
Yeah.
how would you train it, and what type of articles are you looking at for that?
Yeah, so we're looking at mainly professional databases. We go to our college's professional research database to look at reputable sources, medical sources for that in particular, so the AI can analyze it. AI kind of works almost as a human, where you give it articles and you tell it to look at these articles and base your information, base your finding off these articles. And part of our training is to run the credibility analysis, run the bias analysis on these reputable sources and see where the AI is making its mistakes, where it's making good decisions, and we're trying to make it as accurate as possible by focusing on reputable sources.
So how do you envision this being applied? Let's take the example of the guy drinking bleach.
Yeah.
So is he going to use this before he reads articles or
Yes.
before he decides to drink bleach?
Yes, a big issue in our society is that we just read a whole article and have no idea whether it's accurate or not until we finish. And by the time we finish, we already formulate our own opinions. The purpose of this is that it's a Chrome extension. All you need to do to use Sorcerer AI is click on it, and it only takes 15 seconds to analyze the article before you read it. So what he would have done in that situation is use Sorcerer AI, would have understood that this is not a reputable source. This is likely a biased source that has its own implicit biases, and he would have not taken that information. While there is an issue of people being so polarized that they might not use the tool, I'd like to see this be used in education and also sell it to news journalism as a whole to help as a whole, even if we're not able to get people like him, as a whole, get more reputable news.
Okay, so you're assuming a certain level of common sense or. And
or no, I'm understanding that people might not have that. I understand that. Thank you.
From UW Parkside with the topic, investigating CRISPR-Cas9 induced edits in Chlamydomonas. I had this earlier, I swear I did, sorry. Chlamydomonas reinhardtii, using the TLN1 mutant to test desired phenotype changes. Nicholas Winter.
Thank you, Blaine, for that kind introduction. Now, before I dive into what exactly Chlamydomonas reinhardtii actually is, I have a quick question for all of you. How many of you would want to ride in a solar-powered airplane on a cloudy day? Me neither, but I think we can all agree that our current primary source of energy, fossil fuels, needs to change. Fossil fuels, a non-renewable source of energy, are known to have high carbon emissions, which of course contribute to the current climate crisis. Additionally, fossil fuels are becoming quite costly to obtain. One might propose that a solution to this would be to switch to a source like electricity. I mean, have you seen those Cybertrucks? But what if I told you that the very algae living here in the ponds at UW Superior and across the state of Wisconsin could help solve this problem? You see, algae are known to produce high amounts of fat when starved of nitrogen, which is an essential element for all forms of life. One type of this fat can be purified into biofuel. Biofuel is a renewable source of energy as it does come from living organisms like algae. Additionally, biofuel is carbon neutral, meaning that does not contribute to the current climate crisis. I should also add that biofuel can be used in a variety of items, including agricultural objects and current commercial airplanes. Now, in order for biofuel to be mass produced, researchers need to understand exactly how algae make these high amounts of fat. As of late, researchers, including my team run by Dr. David Higgs, have been investigating various genes within algae to determine what effects they might have on this fat accumulation. One common type of algae that has been used to study this behavior is Chlamydomonas reinhardtii, or clammy for short. Currently, myself and my research team have been characterizing a mutated gene in a mutant strain of clammy, which has been shown to increase fat production by 7 times. If we are able to confirm that this gene is in fact responsible for this behavior, we could place this gene into more industrial types of algae. This would allow for the mass production of biofuel, providing agricultural items, and along with airplanes with a high source of energy, alternative to electrical and solar based energies. I should also add that this would save on time and energy, helping and improving our climate. So the next time you look at a pond, remember that the very algae living there could help save the planet. Thank you.
So this is a micro algae
Yes.
as opposed to macro algae. Okay. And have you thought about how it might actually be deployed commercially, like how you might grow it in larger quantities?
So one thing, and there's been some research on this over a decade now, where they've been using raceway ponds, where it's basically a constant filtration system to constantly circulate algae and allow them to grow. So after that, these would be grown probably in warmer climates where there's more sunlight available. But that would also allow for us to then extract these algae in great quantities. And from there, we could extract that fat and then purify it in the biofuel.
How much water is needed to, sort of per the amount of fuel? Like, is water a concern if you're going to be growing it in a place like Arizona, for example?
So it'd be just read this last night actually. I read about 180 milliliters per algae. So not a huge quantity per algae at least.
Could you comment on the regulatory environment around using the gene editing strategy? Is this, are there any concerns about releasing this to the environment, or is this kind of like a fail-safe technology that you're using here?
So kind of what we've been doing, we were fortunate this mutant strain of algae that was discovered in the lab. And it's very similar to the regular or wild type strain of algae. But we have been using some gene editing tools, and those algae that we have been editing are going to be have just been in the lab and are being used purely for study. So to answer your question, we wouldn't be releasing anything with potentially hazardous effects in the environment. Thank you.
All right, well, let's give a big round of applause for all 7 of our participants today. Great job.